Those eligible, vote today, bring correct ID. I found a nice quote from one of the partisans who the political parties are telling their own people how voting is critically important. So it's critically important for everyone to vote. So do that. The midterm is in 1 week's time. There'll be a practice midterm, and what's covered will come out hopefully later today. And are there any questions about anything at all? Questions? Okay, good. So what we're covering now is propositions and inference. And this is what we did last time, as we looked at propositional definite clauses defined in terms of clauses which are made up of facts, which are just atoms, and rules. So there are the atoms by themselves that are clauses, we're calling them facts, and there are rules that form atoms if body. Okay, so there's this very simple language. Interpretation and assignment of truth value to each atom. Then just as in propositional logic, the truth of a formula in an interpretation is built from the components of the formula. So all the time we're going to say is something true in an interpretation, we're breaking it down as to whether its parts are true. So if you remember truth tables you did in one of your first year courses. A model of a knowledge base is an interpretation in which the knowledge base is true. And this knowledge base logically entails G, or G is a logical consequence of KB with this funny symbol, if and only if G is true in every model of this knowledge base, or the other way around, that G is not a logical consequence of this knowledge base, if and only if there's a model of the knowledge base in which G is false. Okay, that's what we did last time. Any questions about that? Any questions? All right. Everyone's happy with that? Good. We can do some clickery questions then. So here's the first one. Consider this knowledge base: foo if bar and sad, bar if grew, sad if bleen. And which of the following is not a model of this knowledge base? So A is everything is true, B is everything is false, C is bar and grew are true and everything else is false, and in D, everything's true except bleen is false. I want to know what is not a model. How are we going here? Oh, yeah. Who needs more time? You people. We can wait. Who still needs more time? Who needs more time? Okay. Yes, the answer is B. Okay, everything being false is not a model. All the others are models. Are there any questions about any of those ones? Does anyone want to know why any of them is? C is a model. If you go through every clause in there, you'll find that C is a model. Any questions about that? All we can do is just for each of these assignments, you just go through the clauses. We'll get more practice, don't worry. Oh, B is the answer. All right, let's look at this one. So it's the same knowledge base we had before. And for the interpretation where everything is false, which of the clauses are false? So everything, foo, bar, everything is false. So which of those clauses are false? Oh, I better start this, hadn't I? So this knowledge base, which of these clauses are false? How are we going? Does anyone need more time? Yes. Does anyone still need more time? Okay, 3, 2, 1, I'm stopping. Yes, only 3 is false. Everything else, the rule's allowed to be false. If the body is false, then the rule is still true. So D is the right answer. Okay, so D is the only one that's false in the interpretation where everything is false. Any questions about that? And let's do another one. Same knowledge base, different interpretation. Foo is true, bar is true, sad is false, gru is true, and bleen is true. So everything's true except sad, and I want to know which of the clauses are false. Seven. Okay, how are we going? Anyone need more time? Anyone need more time? Okay, stop. All right, there's a disagreement here. Is clause 1 true? Well, is the head true? The head is foo is true, right? And the bar is, so the body is false and the head is true. What was the rule about if the head was true and the, right? So this was a case about where we had the head was true and the body was false. And in this, we said the clause was true. So this is the head if body clause. So it turns out that 1 is actually true. So the answer here is E. Okay, so E is false because we have the head is false and the body is true. And then the head is, then the rule is false. Okay? And the other 2 cases, they're both true as well. So it's true, true is true. True, true is true. And what's the other one? False, false is false. False is also, the rule is true. So the rule is only true when it has a counterexample to it, when the body is true and the head is false. Okay, it's so-called material implication. What am I doing here? So the answer was E, right? Any questions? All right, one more. So this is a same knowledge base. Foo with bar and sad. I want to know which of the following are true. Which of the following is a statement about what logically follows from this? If I was you, I'd work out what logically follows first, and then look and see which one matches. How are we going? Need more time? What? Oh, if none of them match, put down E. But I think one of them does, doesn't it? We'll work it out. Anyone start to go? Okay, let's stop here. Oh, that's exciting. So let's go through this. What logically follows from this? What's the first thing that logically follows? This KB entails what? Tell me something that we know that logically follows from this. What's true in all models? GRU, right? What else is true in all the models? Bar, right? Bar must be true in all the models. What else must be true in all the models? Well, we could have sad and bleen and everything else could be false, right? So KB doesn't model, does not model foo, and does not model sad, and does not model, what's the other one? Bleen, right? Is that none of them? Did I mess up? Oh. And I tried hard to make one of them right. No. Oh, well. No, I'm not doing the closest one. Sorry. That's okay. The answer is E, but I didn't give E as a problem. That's fine, we won't grade that one. Right, so GRU and bar are both true. Sorry about that. That's okay. Right, GRU and bar both logically follow, and the other three don't. Because the model when GRU and bar are true and all the others are false. Okay, any questions about that? All right. All right, today what we're going to do is we're going to finish up talking about this semantics of propositional logic, and then we're going to do some proof procedures of how computers can actually do some inference procedures. We're going to show that they're sort of sound and complete. So at the end of this, wait a minute. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with this intended view of semantics. So we're going to choose a task domain, which is some intended interpretation. And now we're going to give this example of this intended interpretation of this house. And here we're actually going to give names to things. So we're going to associate names. We're going to start naming the things in here. We're going to associate atoms with each proposition we want to represent. And on this, we might want to talk about whether the switches, particular switches, are up and down, whether Y is alive or not, because we're going to use this as an example that goes on that we're going to talk about how to simulate electrical systems and debug electrical systems in a house, the sort of thing a smart home might use, or a smart house might use. So what we're going to do is we're just going to associate atoms with things. So in our head, we're going to decide that things like up S2 might be an atom, is an atom that's going to be true when switch 2 is up. So is true when switch 2 is up. So we're going to have all that. So we're going to, OK, L1 is true when light, L1 is not broken. Right, so we might have a whole lot of different atoms. We're going to choose atoms, symbols, and have a meaning to it. So this has our meaning. So these are our symbols we're going to use. These are our atoms. And to us, they're going to have some meaning. Okay, so if atoms have meanings to us, And then we're going to tell the system clauses that are true in this intended interpretation. And so one of the clauses might be true that L1 is lit if there's power coming into W0 and L1 is okay. So we might tell the system clauses about how things are going. So that's the first press. We're going to have atoms with meanings. Then we're going to tell the system things. So we're going to tell the system things like lit L1 if there's power in W0 and OK L1. And this is the sort of thing that we might get from a model of how electrical systems work. And there might be power in W0 if S2 is up, if switch 2 is up, and there's power in wire W1. And there might be power in W0 if switch 2 is down, switch 2, and there's power in, what's the other one? In W2. Okay, so we're going to write down rules about how the world works. Effectively, we're going to try tell the system things that are true about how the world works. We're going to try and model how the world works in this sort of simple domain. Then we can ask questions of this knowledge base. We can ask, we're going to be able to do things like asking, we're going to ask, is L1 lit? And the system here might say yes. Oh, sorry. It should say no, shouldn't it? Hopefully. No. We might ask if L2 is lit. Oh, sorry, it's lit L1, wasn't it? Sorry. I used the same one before. Lit L1. And if I ask lit L2, it might say yes. You can ask questions about it, and the system's going to do two things. This means that the knowledge base entails L1 is lit. So this one here implies the knowledge base entails L1 lit L1, and here this means the knowledge base doesn't entail lit L2, lit L1. Okay, so we're going to say no if the system's going to tell us no if it doesn't logically entail and yes if it does logically entail. And now we can interpret these symbols, because they have meaning to it, that this means the light is lit, according to our semantics. Okay, so we can interpret answers according to our semantics in terms of this task domain. Okay, so we can interpret these answers according to what the task domain means. Okay, so here is an axiomatization of this circuit about how we could sit there and model what goes on in this house. Right? We could model the house about how, you can imagine someone giving a model about how this house works. It says, well, light L1 is connected to light W0, to wire W0, and if okay, and if as long as it's okay, it's going to work. W0 is connected to lines, to wires W1 or W2, depending on whether the switch is up or down. Right? W1 is live if W3, the wire that comes down from the circuit breaker 1, and switch 1 is up. Right? So this is an axiomatization about how, sort of a common sense axiomatization about how lights work. Right? If you do electrical engineering, they'll tell you, no, it's much more complicated than that. There's circuits that go backwards. We're just going to model this at some high level representation. We might want to model at a lower level model, but now we're just going to model at some high level thing which just has wires are live or not live and switches just switch between them. Right? This is sort of a common sense view about how electrical environments work. And we can ask questions about it, and if you ask questions, you'll find out you can prove that L1 is lit. The answer is no, it's not a logical consequence. And if you ask about 2 is lit, then it is a logical consequence. And if you trace down why L2 is lit, it's because W4 is live and OKO1. So if you look at Y, right, L1 is lit, L2 is lit. It's lit because of this thing. Right, that's how we know that L1 is lit, because we know that W4 is live. How do we know that W4 is live? Well, because we're going to know that W3 is live. And we know that up S3, whoops, where's dog? That's better. Okay, we're now going to know that the live W4 is live because S3 is up. If you look at up S3, we're going to know that live W3 is live because it says live W5 and OK circuit breaker. And I think circuit breaker is 1 OK. Why is W5 live? If you look at W5, W5 is live because it's live outside, because it's connected to the outside wire and it's live outside. Does that make sense? So what we can do is we can just, essentially the idea is going to write down rules about how the world works. And then we're going to be able to ask questions and saying, yes, no, about how the world can work in here. And this has this property that if we move the switches, if we suddenly change it so the switch 1 is up and instead of down, it's going to tell you that the light will go on. Right? So if we change this so that switch S1 is up, all of a sudden the light's going to go off. It'll tell us that. Okay, so that's the sort of idea we're going to do. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions about that? Yeah. Oh, good question. Is there a way to prove it? All right. Yes, that's what we're going to do next. All right. Let's go. All right. All right. So let's talk about how to go about the good question. I didn't even pay him. So what we're going to do is talk about proofs about how to go about deriving logical consequences. Hang on. Right. So proof is going to be some mechanically derived demonstration of a formula logically follows from a knowledge base. We're going to have proofs of things, and we're going to make mechanically derived proofs. We're going to have very simple proof procedures. And we're going to use this funny symbol to mean KB. You can derive, it means you can prove G from this knowledge base. Okay, so this means, so this symbol is to do with proof, and the other symbol was to do with logically follows from, to do with possible worlds and models and interpretations. Okay, so this is just to do with mechanically proving things. And we have this other symbol, KB. This two-turn star means KB is true in all models. So one's talking about all models and one's talking about proofs. And a proof procedure is sound if you can prove it, then it logically follows. Right? So if you can prove something, then it logically follows. So if you look at the proofs as the things we're going to predict, it means there are sort of no false positives or false negatives. Which way around is it? Who can work it out? Who knows what false positives and false negatives are? Yeah. Do people know what that is? Yeah. Which way around does sound mean? I can't remember. So sound means there are no false. Which around does it mean? Why would it be negatives? You've only got two choices. What's a false positive? It's a false negative, something that we didn't prove that was true. Right, but this says that if we prove it, then it must be true. So if it's no... Is that right? So negative means you didn't prove it. A negative here means you didn't prove it to be. So false negatives mean we didn't prove it, but it was false. But it doesn't logically follow. Is that what that means? Oh, but it does logically follow because it's false. Is that right? Is that right? Who's suspicious of this? He's suspicious of it. I'm suspicious of it too. I think it's the wrong way around. Isn't it? See, we're going to prove something. We're going to prove something. So no false positives. Means that there's something that we proved. We proved. This is something we proved. And this is something it's falsely proved, so it doesn't follow from the knowledge base. And there's none of them. Is this helpful at all? No. So there's no. We have a choice. We're talking about either things we didn't prove that do logically follow, or we're talking about things that we did prove that don't logically follow. So which way around is it? There's two ways around here, two ways. Let's scratch our head. Who knows how to do, yeah.
So wait, just to clarify, you're trying to figure out what that last one is, right?
This is my definition of sound, and I want to know whether it corresponds to this or to this. Yeah.
Corresponds to no false positives, because if we are implying G, then it is sound only if it is actually a conclusion. So we are never proving something which was not following.
Yeah, so this is right. This is sound. This is not sound. It means there's nothing that we can prove that doesn't logically follow. So everything that we prove, it logically follows. So everything that can be proved logically follows. Right, so there's nothing that we can be proved that doesn't logically follow. So that's a false. Is that helpful? No, yeah. But soundness only talks about things we can prove. It only talks about positives. Right, so soundness only talks about things we can prove. It doesn't say anything about negative, false negative, anything about negatives. Right, so this thing here only talks about what we can prove. Okay? And the other way around is complete. So if you can logically imply G, if it logically implies, then you can prove it. So no things that there are no false, this is complete. There are no false negatives. Right, so if we said no, The answer was said, if we said no, then it doesn't logically follow. Right? So if the system says no, it doesn't logically follow, then it doesn't. So if the knowledge base does not, you cannot prove G. In other words, G is a negative. Then the knowledge base, then G does not logically follow. It's good to sort of puzzle these things out. It's good to puzzle these things out. Do it. We'll do it. We'll go through a proof. We'll see what they do mean in a second. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a proof procedure, and I'm going to show it's actually sound and complete. So I've got one simple proof procedure. It's sort of a generalized forms of modus ponens. You've probably heard of modus ponens. It says if you have an implication, you've proved the body of it, you can prove the head of it, essentially. So it says if you have a rule, if you have a clause in the knowledge base, and each element of the body has been derived, then we can derive H. Intuitively, we can think about this as forward chaining on the rules. And this also covers the case when m is 0, so if m is 0, there's no body, we can immediately derive an atom for which the body is empty. Okay, so we can just forward chain on these rules. Okay, so here's another way of putting the same thing. We're going to derive G if G is an element of C at the end of this procedure. So we're going to start off with C as the empty list, then we're going to repeatedly select the clause. We're going to repeatedly select a clause from the knowledge base such that all of the elements of the body are in C, and H, the head is not an element of C, then we're going to add H to C. We're going to keep going that until we can't add any more clauses. So we're just going to start forward chaining on these rules. So we're going to keep adding these things. So let's have a look at an example of this. So we're going to start off just as this, oops. So we're going to start off with C as, if we look back, C is the empty set. This big set of consequences is the empty set. And then we're going to repeatedly select a clause. Is there a clause we can select? Which clause can we select that the body is true and the body is an element of this C? So this is the only tricky part of the whole algorithm. Was there one we can choose? Is there any elements? Is there anything here that we can immediately add? We know is immediate a consequence of C. So we can add E. So we can select. We can select this E. In which case our consequence set just contains E. So this is the case where it has the body is empty. So there's nothing to choose. So every element of the body here has no empty body. So this one here has an empty body. And so everything in the empty body is in C, so we can add C, yes? Because there's this E by itself, this single E here. So what else can we, maybe we'll go back to this in a second. What can we select next? Is there any rule? So let's look at this rule again. So the rule was, oh hang on, can I chew this? Hang on, I'll see if I can get this on here. Sorry. There it is. Let's do this. Wait. All right. So now we have this. Is there any other rule we can select? So now we've gone through this repeated. We've added E to this clause. Is the next which clause can we select next? What can we select? I want to select the rule where every element of the body is in E. What can I select? I'm going to select a rule. Is there a rule where every element of the body is in this consequence set? Is there one? What? I can't see it. It's too high. It hurts my neck to look. What do I have to tell me? You have to tell me. What is the rule? I've got to select a clause. Which clause should I select? Right. C if E. And now what's my consequence set going to be? What's my consequence set going to be? Now what can I add in here? What can I add to C? I'm going through this procedure. I selected this rule, C if E. Right, so it now contains little c and E. Right, so now what can I select? Is there anything else I can select? Sorry, I can't hear. So I can select F if C. I can only select one at a time, F if C. And now what's C equal to? This consequence set. Sorry, I can't read it. You have to tell me. C, E, and F. Thank you. Now I'm going to go through that loop. I've done that. I added it to C. Now I'm going to go through this loop again. I'm going to select a clause. What clause should I select? Someone said J if C, right? And now what's C equal to? What are we going to add to the? What am I going to add to C? J, right? C, E, F, J. Right? Now what can I select? Now what can I select? Anything? Sorry, I can't hear. You have to be louder. Okay, A, if, E, and F. And now what's C going to be equal to? All right, C, E, F, J, and A. Now what can I select? Nothing. Okay? So then, these are the logical consequences, and only these. Does that make sense? So we got to this end of it. Once you've repeated this, the knowledge base logically entails all of these things and doesn't entail, sorry, the knowledge base, you can prove these things, we can't prove anything else. Okay, does that make sense? This is the only weird thing. This just has an empty body, so any fact we can just throw it in straight away. It's just this base case, like a base case in a recursion. We've got to have this base case here. The base case is an element with no bodies. If every rule has a body, then a clause, then C will be the empty set, and nothing will logically follow. Okay, any questions about that? Yes? If there's no atom by itself, then there are no logical consequences. Nothing follows. Because the model where every atom is false is a model. So the interpretation where every atom is false is a model. All right, so let's try and work out whether, let's try and do this soundness. Let's try and prove soundness. Does everyone understand what the algorithm is, first of all? People, any questions about the algorithm? We're just going to keep adding in. As soon as we have one rule where the body has all been derived, we're going to derive the head of this clause. So what we want to prove is that if we can prove G, then it must logically follow. And so we're going to assume that there's some G so that we can prove G and G doesn't logically follow. So that's what we're going to try and get a contradiction from this proof, from this. Okay, so we're going to try and derive this. And if that's true, then there must be a first element added to C that isn't true in every model. So if there's one model that we've derived, so it was added to C that isn't true in every model, there must be a first one. Right? So if we keep adding elements, and eventually one of them isn't an element of doesn't logically follow, then there must be a first one that doesn't logically follow. We're going to call that H. So it's the first one that isn't true in every model. Okay? So now we're going to suppose that H is not true in a model I of this knowledge base. And now, because H is an element of C, there must be some clause of the form H if B1 and Bm, where B1 down to Bm is in C, because that's the only way we could add H to it. The only way we could add H to this knowledge base is by having some rule. That's the only way we can add any element to C, is if we have a rule like this for all the bodies are elements of C, and then we can add H to it. So if H is an element of C, by this procedure, that must be the case. However, we now have that each BI is true in I because they all logically follow, because H was the first one that wasn't. And H is false in I, and so that's a contradiction to the fact that I is a model of the knowledge base. So I've got a contradiction. So I keep adding things in, and once I added things in, I can never add in an element that doesn't logically follow, is what this says. Every time I add an element into it, it has to logically follow. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Right, so it's a contradiction to I being a model of this knowledge base. So every time I add something in, I'm only adding it in if it's a logical consequence. So the only time I'm ever going to add something in is if it's a logical consequence. So every time I have this C, everything in C is always a logical consequence. Any questions about that? All right. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do the other way around now. That was soundness, basically an argument that says whenever we prove anything, it's a logical consequence. And now we're going to do the other way around. So the C generated at the end of this algorithm, the C, once we've looped down here, is actually called a fixed point. It's going to be called a fixed point because we're going to not add anything into it. We can't add anything into it as we go around this loop again. So we've sort of stopped. We've stopped adding things into it. If it's not, right, if it's not that, we're going to keep going. So we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going. All right, so that's just called a fixed point. And now we're going to define I to be an interpretation in which every element of the fixed point is true and every other atom is false. Okay, so we're going to say, in here we're going to define I as an interpretation in which C, E, F, J, and A are all true and everything else is false. Okay, so we're going to have this funny interpretation defined by the fixed point. Now we've got to show that I is a model of this knowledge base. And we're going to suppose that there's some rule in the knowledge base that's false in I. And if there's no such rule, then it's a model. Okay, so to show that something is a model, we're going to suppose it's not a model. We're going to suppose there's some rule in the knowledge base that's false in this interpretation. The only way this can be false in the interpretation is if H is false and HBI is true. So that's the only way we can have a false thing, is if the head is false and the body is all true. That's the only way that it can be false. However, if the head is false, then HBI is an element of the C, because each element of BI is true, it must be an element of C, and H is not an element of C. And that can't happen in this fixed point, right? Because if it was true, if there was a rule where H, if B1 down to Bm was true and each of the BIs was true, we'd be able to add it, right? So it would be an element of it. So H can be added to C, and that's a contradiction to C being a fixed point, because now we can add this element that wasn't in it before, we can add a new element. So it turns out that what's going to be I is called this minimal model. It has the least things true in it. Okay, so I is this minimal model, and this minimal model is the one that's generated by C. And now we can do, how am I going? I've got 2 minutes. All right. So now I can do this time. So if G logically follows, then we can prove it. So suppose that we have this knowledge base logically entails G, then G is true in all models of this knowledge base. Thus, G is true in the minimal model. Because it's true in all models, it must be true in the minimal model. And thus, G is in the fixed point. And the only way it can be in the fixed point is it's generated by the bottom-up algorithm, and then that way we can prove it. So it's both sound and complete. And one of the reasons why we did this very simple logic is it's reasonably straightforward to show that it's both proof procedures can be both sound and complete for this logic. It's really complicated to do it for any richer language, but here it's sort of reasonably straightforward that once we keep adding things into it, we're going to get a model. The model is defined by this fixed point, has the least number of things in it, and if we can't prove it, then it's false in that model, so it doesn't logically follow. So soundness and completeness is reasonably straightforward for that. All right, any questions about that? Okay, let's stop. I've got assignments here. I'll put them on the